And here we have lesson 6, the last lesson in the fundamentals art lessons that I was doing. Lessons on line, tone, shape, colour, texture and composition. If you haven't seen any of those already, they're all on the channel. Looking at the very basics of how you can start as a beginner looking at the fundamentals of art. Once these lessons are finished, what I'm then going to do is I'm going to start releasing the principles of art, where all these fundamentals get used in a painting or a picture with other, I wouldn't say rules, I'd say guidelines as to how to construct your picture, how to make sense of a painting. So the principles of art will be done after the lessons, and I'll probably be releasing those midweek. So I'll do my normal videos on a Monday of the adventures that we're going to start getting up to next week, and then from then on might do principles every now and again, but they'll be midweek, they won't interrupt the Monday releases. So today's lesson 6 is on composition, and composition is basically the arrangement of the elements of the picture to enhance what you're trying to say in that picture. So if you're trying to make it pleasing or tense or relaxing, or even introduce action and movement into your painting, these are all parts of the composition. So I have some elements here, all sorts of, going old school, going bits of paper rather than digital. The first one we're going to do is a centered composition, where you have an element, you put it in the center of the composition. This then becomes a focal point. Most paintings have got 1 or 2 focal points. Not all of them will have focal points. Not all of them will have guidelines, which is the next thing I'm going to talk about. So guidelines are things that come in from the edges of the paper to point towards the focal point. So on this I could put a horizon, and then I could put the cloud shapes coming towards the tree, and then maybe there's a fence coming up here, and I don't know, maybe a bank of rough grass with some flowers and things in it. So all those guidelines are leading to that one focal point, and that focal point can be anything. Another tree, could be a block. I'm just playing with my things now, aren't I? So basically what you've got is all of these leading to that. Now if I take this element and move it here, can you see how it just looks a bit wrong? There's nothing where all the guidelines are actually leading your eye to. It's empty. You may put the sun there, but if you put the sun there, then what about this? This side looks really empty. You could stick another tree in it, and again the focal point's leading to the center again. Where do you put the elements to enhance the meaning of the painting? Centered composition. The next one we're going to do is rule of thirds, and what I'm going to do is, you don't actually do this when you're doing the painting. You can do if you're mapping it out, but this is just an idea of highlighting some areas where you can put focal elements, focal point elements. Here, here, here and here. So where those lines cross and where the lines actually are is where you can place certain elements. Like here, if I put the horizon along that third, maybe put a tree on that third and a sun there, you can see how it's quite pleasing. And if I bring sort of things coming off into this space and things going off into that space, that is moving along those third lines. Even this cloud here, the thickest bit sort of comes down the rule of third lines. So these rules of thirds aren't sort of, you've got to do it exactly on that line. It's just saying that this strip and this strip is a good place to put things, this strip or this strip. Now I could, if we then sort of had this too low down, if I put it like that, then that something doesn't work with it. So these guidelines that you put on are more to help plan a composition rather than you've got to do it this way. Another option that you could have would be to think about what overall shape do you want in this composition. So say I just had my geometric shapes like this, but just sort of, even there, because they're all gathered round that rule of thirds line, it doesn't look too bad. And if I moved them all into the centre, it wouldn't look too bad. But if I moved them all there, it looks like they're going to fall into the picture. And if I move them down there, it looks like they're sitting at the bottom of the picture. Over there, it looks like they're sort of about to fall in. So it's where you put things in the picture really makes a difference. So this third one about shapes, I don't mean these shapes. I mean the shape that you're going to put them into. Sort of a triangle shape, which is a shape that's used quite a lot when designing things. Things in triangles actually works quite well visually. What I'm doing is I'm taking that, the line of that triangle up there, up to there, and I'm going to take the line of that triangle up to there. And without that line in the background, it would be quite a pleasing arrangement. It would be as if you're doing trees together, if you did trees and then maybe a bush here and a bush here, and then this being the focal point, you have things leading into it, and even the outside of trees, the background trees. Can you see how if I do a mountain in the background, it peaks along the line of that triangle? And more trees on that side. So you're like looking across. I'd probably want to put maybe another tree in here somewhere. That's a bit better. So it's a pleasing arrangement. And the lines bring it into that focal point here within that triangle. Let's do one this way around. Like just a curve. If you want something with a bit of motion. Not as easy this way, but if we did them like that, a mountain there, that would be our focal point in the middle of this curve. So the curve is surrounding this mountain. Maybe a tree in the foreground with its branch. And then to keep that curve going, what I'd want to do is actually lift it up a little bit on this side to keep that curve going. So maybe another treat or so here. In that one, I had a triangular, bit of a centered composition on that one. And in this one, we have the curve going round. There's the focal point. And although we don't have any guidelines apart from these two taking us to the focal point, that curve surrounds that area. So if we had this in one colour and this in another, it would really stand out. So there's how you can use an overall shape to your painting, a curve or a triangle. You could do rigid angles, you could do a spiral, you could do an hourglass shape, you could do a horseshoe shape, you could do a vertical triangle. One of the ones that gets done quite a lot is just a very large triangular shape, either that way up where everything leads to a point, probably not up at the top, probably on this line here, or everything leads down into a point at the bottom. The next one we're going to look at is one that people recognise, and it's actually quite difficult to use, because if you're going to use it properly, you need to start getting compasses and pencils and, not calculators, but compasses and rulers and set squares and things out to get it looking right. And what you may recognise, if I start doing it, if I start drawing something like this, you may recognise that, and that curve is similar to, it's not exact because I haven't measured it out, it's the golden ratio. Basically, if I drew a line here, that would be 1.618 compared to that at 1. So if that was 1 of something, that would be 1.68, 618 of something. And it would be the same here. If that was 1.618, that would be 1. And so it continues down, there. That there, 1.618, that would be 1. And it keeps getting smaller and smaller. And that creates a Fibonacci sequence as well, but it's the golden ratio. And at the end of the day, all that's saying is, if you have all the energy in the composition coming round on this spiral, this is going to be your focal point. And before people start getting like a bit panicky about that one, I do want to point out that that square, I don't know if you can see in the background behind here, the rule of thirds, it's pretty much on that crossover line there. It isn't quite, it's a bit further up, but it's very close. So even though that would be your focal point here, so let's change our setup. We're not going to do trees this time, and have, there we go. And if I carry on, you get the idea, yeah? And you could have them all flowing in that spiral of the golden section. So this is another way you can put a focal point in a specific place, and instead of your rule of thirds where everything's horizontal and vertical, you have the overriding curve coming round. And if you just remember that that curve starts in this corner and goes up and over the top. Hello, have you come to help me? As long as it comes up and over the top and behind and in, you're going to get pretty much the golden section relationship. Okay. Do you want to learn about this too? Do you want to go out? And the last thing I want to talk about is storytelling. And it doesn't mean that your painting is going to be full of narrative. It's pretty much what I was saying at the beginning, in that what are the elements of your drawing or painting doing? Are they sitting at the bottom? Are they sitting at the bottom of the drawing? Are they clustered to one side, about to fall into the drawing? Are they hanging on to the top of your drawing? And it's the same if you have two people in your, put them on the rule of thirds, within the thirds. Not bad, centre composition, nice balance there. If it was over here, you'd want to know what's going on here. So sometimes you can actually make it more interesting by taking two people that are talking to each other and maybe have them both looking at something that's down on the floor. Or maybe they're talking about something that's up in the sky. Maybe they're both looking at something off here. Now, if you start playing with things that are away from your painting, what you're doing is you're taking your viewer's eye off the painting. If that's what you want to do, that's brilliant. But if you have them here, it brings them into the painting, and then you may want to have an element there that they're both looking at. So storytelling is about what are the elements doing. People who want to be far apart from each other, people who know each other really well, and whereabouts on the page are they doing. If you have them down here, is there something happening over here that could indicate that that's what they may be talking about? That's the storytelling element of it. That's the storytelling part of composition, is whereabouts on the page are you putting things to keep the energy in and the flow in the image, but making it more interesting rather than just having one person in the centre or one tree in the centre. Okay, so we've looked at centred composition. Then we looked at rule of thirds, which is really useful for having your horizontals and verticals. Then I gave you a few examples of how to use a shape in an overall picture. All the energy leading to a focal point at the top, these will be guide lines, and your focal point would be up there. You could do that upside down and have all the guidelines, all the energy of flow of everything coming to one at the bottom. Or you could have that curve going around the outside, leading the eye to a focal point in the distance. Or a triangle. Different shapes, giving different feelings. Then we went on to golden ratio, where it's very similar to rule of thirds, but instead of everything being horizontal and vertical, there's a flow coming across in a curve, going behind the subject, having the subject there. All these composition ideas are options. You don't have to obey all of them. It's impossible. But think about what you're trying to say. when we start talking about the principles of art, when I start releasing them, you'll see that depending on the feeling you're trying to capture and what you're trying to enhance in the painting will affect all the fundamentals. It will affect the composition, the colour, the tone, the shapes that you're using, the lines that you're using, all those things, even the textures, all of them. I could have easily just said all of them there. So thank you very much for this one. There's only one thing left to do today, and that's questions and answers. Questions and answers. This is a really quick one today. It's from Catherine, and it's how do you stop acrylics drying out so quickly? And she doesn't mean on the palette, she means when you're putting them on the canvas. How do you prolong the life of the time that you've got, prolong the time that you've got for actually working with them? And you can actually buy things, paint retarders that actually slow down the drying process. Acrylic paint is made with a binder and pigment, and that binder has a drying time. If you add the retarder, it increases the amount of binder, so they can be a little bit more translucent sometimes, but it slows down the process of them drying. It can be really useful when you're trying to use them as glazes and things like that, to work the acrylics more as oil paints as well. But the whole point of enjoying acrylics is how fast they dry anyway for me, so I don't really use them that much. I would say try and stick with the brand name that you use in your paints. That's going to be, I think, the most logical thing. Right, thanks very much, and this is the last one. This is the last lesson on fundamentals. Watch out for the principles, and from now on, we're going to get back into the adventures. Next week, it's a quick video about when I had a visitor in the studio, and then the big news is revealed the week after that. Thanks very much. Bye.